So I want to talk about my wilderness journey. I did share my testimony on YouTube last year, but I did not fully share it on TikTok. So I'm going to sum it up because it's very complex. But about 2 years ago, the Lord called me into ministry and He commanded me to sell and donate all of my possessions. So that is what I did. And He told me I had to leave everything behind, and made me move into my car for about 5 months. And this is where I learned deliverance, and He freed me from wicked spirits that were tormenting me my entire life and keeping me bound to sin. And during this period, I studied my Bible 8 to 9 hours a day, learning to hear God's voice. I did a lot of fasting and praying and repenting of my sins. I wasn't quite sure what it was that the Lord wanted me to do, and I was being very stubborn and rebellious towards Him. So after about 5 months, I was begging Him to put me back out in the world. He allowed me to work for about 2 months. I worked 60 hours between 2 jobs, and it was enough money for me to get me into an apartment. So after about 7 months, I was able to get into an apartment where I thought I was going to start my life over again. But that was not what happened. God was trying to tell me that I was no longer a worker of men, but a servant of the Lord, and I was to serve Him fully. And this was a selfless sacrifice that He was commanding me to do. And He wasn't allowing me to work at my jobs anymore. So I was stuck in this apartment for another 4 months. I began to run out of resources. I lost my vehicle, my SUV that I was living in, and I no longer had funds to feed myself. I did not have a phone, and I had no means of transportation to get anywhere. So after I ran out of food, this is where the Lord started to test my faith, and He put me through a famine and starved me for 2 weeks. I was living on chicken broth and vitamins, and I had to pray my way through this famine and rely on God's strength to keep me alive. And so my time came to an end after the 4 months, and I was no longer able to stay in that apartment. And I was under the impression that the Lord was sending my husband to come rescue me, and he never came to get me. The Lord threw me out on the streets for 5 weeks. I was homeless. I was wandering around in the middle of the winter with a suitcase, not knowing where I was going to go, and the Lord was providing shelter for me and during that time. And I ended up sleeping underneath a staircase in my old apartment, and this is where the wicked Satanist came and found me and offered me a place to stay and said he would support me during my ministry. But come to find out, this man was full of wicked spirits, and this is where I tried to save his life and bring him to Christ and deliver him through these wicked spirits, but he was not obedient. I lived there for 10 months. This is where I was prophesying judgment on TikTok. During this time, I was locked in my bedroom for 10 months while he tormented and persecuted me. And I was only allowed to have 1 meal a day. He was trying to starve me into submission. After about 10 months, I begged the Lord to save me from the suffering, and He gave me victory. I was able to get a protection order on him, and he was kicked out of his apartment. During this entire time that I was living with this man while he was tormenting me, I was in contact with my ex-husband about my children, and I was trying to arrange to see my children somehow. I was trying to make peace with him, but he has been very spiteful. Instead of forgiving me, he's been very spiteful and vindictive towards me, and has done everything he possibly can to keep my children away from me during this entire time. So I have not seen my children in 2 years. I did have a friend on TikTok that the Lord sent to come rescue me from this apartment. And since then, we have been living in our vehicle, or her vehicle, for the past 3 months. And we are now waiting on the Lord to move us forward. So this is a quick summary of my testimony. It's very complex. It aligns with Scripture. I have included Scripture before in my testimony. But I want you guys to know what kind of selfless sacrifice I have had to make to serve the Lord. And it was to train me up in righteousness and to prune me of all that bad fruit from living a sinful life, and to fully serve the Lord. And so, guys, troubling times are coming, and you need to prepare for these times that are coming in tribulation. And you're going to have to learn to rely on the Lord's strength and His provision to get you through the end of tribulation. So those that endure to the end will be saved.